AI in Europe with a number of different projects of various kinds. It's an interesting mix of projects that we are having in this session, which will run until 12 o'clock. So to give you a quick overview of the next round about 90 minutes, these are the projects / initiatives and the names of the presenters. First up, we have live speech to text and MT tool for 24 languages in the European Parliament. Interesting project, which is in a way in its first initial phase that we will hear about. Then a German project, nationally funded, called Speaker, on smart conversational agents and chatbots, etc. Another German-funded project, more geared towards research data management, research data infrastructure, called NFBI for data science and artificial intelligence. Next up, a European project, even called a European perspective, geared towards the European digital public sphere by colleagues from EBU, European Broadcasting Union in Switzerland. Also a very interesting development there, followed by presentation of the project WeVerify, which we just heard about also in the industry session. And then finally, brief state of play in CLAIR, the European AI network. Afterwards, we have quite a bit of time for a panel discussion. Yeah, so in terms of orchestration, what we will do in this session is we have these 10-minute presentations. I will start the timer on my phone here so that we stick to the time boxes. If then in 1 or 2 presentations run slightly over, then that's okay. But this is an ambitious program here with 7 speakers in total, so that we have a bit of time for questions afterwards. Yeah, so also to the audience, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, but also reserve them for later so that we can talk about your questions in the panel discussion. The presenters will share their screens and their presentations from their own machines for technical reasons this time in this session. Yeah, so let's get started. First presentation is, as mentioned, live speech to text and machine translation tool for 24 languages. This presentation is presented by Marcin Feder. He's the head of the speech to text unit at DG Trat. So DG Translation is the complementary general directorate in the European Commission. DG Trat is taking care of many different language services in the European Parliament. Before that, Marcin has been an interpreter at the European Parliament since 2003 and the head of the Polish interpretation unit since 2012. Great. Marcin, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation. Let me start sharing my screen. What's something? Okay, I'm almost there. It's always a bit slow when you want to. It's PowerPoint here. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, very clear.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. So yes, let me start briefly with. Okay, let me start briefly with explaining where I come from. As you said, Georg, I'm in DG Translation of the European Parliament, and our unit, together with 4 other units, is in a recently created Directorate for Citizens Language, which is quite important because this directorate is all about accessibility and bringing the work of the European Parliament closer to its citizens in various forms, in terms of simpler language, in terms of subtitling, in terms of making the work of the House of European History more accessible in terms of creating podcasts and audio material for the citizens, and in terms of creating a live transcript of plenary debates. So yeah, the unit is also a relatively new construct in the Parliament and in DG Trad, and we are obviously our main task is to oversee the implementation of the live speech-to-text and machine translation tool in 24 languages project. If you would like to see some more information to find out more about the actual scope of the project, you can easily find it on the web. On the e-tendering platform. If you just Google speech to text in the European Parliament, you will find the link very quickly. So obviously this is the core of our activity, but we also look at other language-related technologies to keep up to date with them, to stay abreast of what's going on in the industry, because it potentially has a huge impact on what we do. And despite the fact that currently the tool, the project is foreseen to be a standalone application, we are already thinking about integrating this technology with other platforms of the European Parliament. And that's why we're liaising with other services. We're also trying to even pilot it on a very limited scale at certain events. The project scope is currently limited to plenary sessions. And its main goal, as I said, is accessibility for the deaf and the hard of hearing audience. Currently, this part of the population, of European population, does not really have any access to what we do during plenary sessions as the Parliament. And therefore, it was decided to try to sort of bridge this gap and offer this option to the deaf and the hard of hearing. Otherwise, you have live interpretation, and of course, there are translation services provided by my Director General. Another option is to basically make it accessible to anyone who wants to follow the plenary debates in the so-called silent mode for any reason. People are traveling. You know yourselves that when you consume social media, for example, you very often do it in the silent mode when you have the subtitles or some form of a text available. Now, I said subtitles, but it's not really subtitles. What we do is real-time raw transcript. It's not subtitles, it's not captions, it's live running texts, something similar to what you have with your subtitling option offered for this conference. And it's a traditional cascading approach. So you have the audio feed of the original speech, which is automatically transcribed in real time, as I said. So you get this product, which is, as I said, raw. There is no human intervention whatsoever. It is what it is. It is what you get, and then immediately at the same time, also in real time, it gets machine translated into all the other languages, official languages of the European Union. So that's why it says 24 languages in the title of the project. So this is another view of the components of the tool. I mentioned automatic speech recognition, which is also combined with language identification. We call it LID. And it's also real-time language identification. It's one of the specifications that our contractors had to meet to be awarded the contracts. It is a multi-device user interface, which means that it's available on any device anywhere. So it can be a mobile phone, it can be a tablet, it can be a computer, it can be projected on the screen. And wherever you are. So that's why I said live running text, because people might follow our debates when they are traveling, at an airport lounge or wherever they are. And another component of the tool is a human machine learning interface. It is not live. We don't foresee it to be live, so there is no live intervention, as I said. But so we can do it after the fact. So it will mainly be used for training and improving the models, uploading more material, and possibly correcting the gravest errors that we detect. And the material that we feed the tool with is mostly and most importantly the recordings from the plenary sessions. So we have a lot of material from the past. We get a lot of material as we go along because we have a plenary session every month. So we get a few more hours of recordings every month. Another type of feed for the tool is other reference texts, so minutes, agendas, and the verbatim that is produced in the Parliament in the original language from the floor after each session. And we also use translation memories of any possible background documents that have been translated by our service. So it is reports, opinions, resolutions, and plenary questions. It is a very interesting form of public procurement, which is called innovation partnership. Maybe some of you are familiar with that. I don't think before us there was any EU institution that has done that, but I know that some national authorities have tried it. And it means that you are trying to acquire a tool or a service that doesn't exist on the market. The tender, the specifications were written about 3 years ago, so certainly at that time there was no tool that would offer you all 24 languages with speech recognition and live machine translation. I don't think it exists today, so I think it's the premise is still valid. But of course, there have been many developments, many commercial developments as we went along, and maybe at this stage it would be just easier to acquire something that is on the market and try to customize it. But at that time, we decided that we would go for a full development from the scratch in a research partnership with some private sector companies or consortia, because usually our contractors or our applicants were consortia combining a private sector company and a research institute to give you a better picture. So we were quite pleased to receive 11 applications at the very beginning when the tender was launched, which to us proved that there were people out there who believed it was possible to do it. Then we shortlisted 5, and then we, after a live demo test, we selected 3 companies who started about a year ago developing some language models for stage 1. I will show you the language models on my last slide. Why 3? Because that's the beauty of the innovation partnership. This project is foreseen to last for 3 years. And in year 1, we were able to have 3 companies together compete against one another. And at the year of this stage 1, year 1, which more or less ended at the beginning of October, we ran a full-scale evaluation and selected one of the 3 who is staying with us for year 2 and hopefully for year 3, because there will be another evaluation round at the end of year 2, so around summer this year. And this is the timeline of the project and my last slide. So in year 1, we developed language models ASR and MT for 10 languages. They are listed there, and there is no particular bias in the choice of the languages. It's only based on the amount of data that we had. So in year 1, we decided to go for the languages for which we had most data, which is a direct reflection of the frequency of being spoken in our plenary sessions. And now we are in stage 2, when we are developing 9 additional language models and improving the existing 10. And we will repeat that for stage 3 with yet another 5 languages for which the data is limited. So we are sort of waiting to accumulate a little bit more and be better prepared in terms of the languages, of language data. So that's, I think, as I said, I think it was my last slide. So that's it. And as Georg said, I hope we will have some time at the end to address your questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for this brief overview. I'm Marcin, I'm very happy that these types of technologies that we've all been working on for many, many years now find their way into the parliament, which is great. Also, the use case is important, and for accessibility purposes, it's interesting use case, and I hope that we can hear from you again, let's say in half a year time at Metaphor in 2022. Right on.
Okay, it would be my pleasure. Thank you.
Next up is the project speaker. The presenter is Johannes Fischer from Fraunhofer IIS in Erlangen, where Johannes is a researcher and project manager. He used to be an associate researcher at the International Audio Laboratories in Erlangen. And Johannes happens also to be the project manager of this very interesting German-focused project, but potentially maybe there is a European spin here in this project. Johannes, the floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you very much, Georg, for giving me the opportunity to introduce the Speaker project. I hope you see the slides. So in Speaker, we develop a speech assistant platform made in Germany. And the mission and the vision is that our voice assistants will simplify human-machine interaction in especially a professional environment. So why the consortium leaders are Fraunhofer IIS as well as Fraunhofer IIS. The first kind of background of ours is we provide outstanding AI technologies, and the team at the two institutes, they build on technology expertise and already successes. To give you a brief overview, is Fraunhofer IIS has more than 1,100 employees and is thus the biggest Fraunhofer, and has 12 locations with the main location in Erlangen. And our core competencies are audio and media technologies, as well as cognitive senses. And there was already great success and long experience in the global licensing of audio technologies. Maybe you know some of the codecs we're involved in, such as MP3, AAC, EVS, or MPEG-H. But also we have audio reproduction systems and algorithms, such as provided with Symphoria. Symphoria is audio reproduction systems for the automotive industry, and already available in different major car brands, but also up here, which is kind of interesting when we're talking about voice technology, because up here is a microphone enhancement system, which is used and already in productive usage in the Yandex speaker, and also to basically optimize the sound acquisition of multi-microphone arrays. One more technology that I can already show you a preview here is our speech synthesis component. And I would like our TTS actually to introduce the other Fraunhofer Institute.
Fraunhofer IIS has more than 300 employees at the locations St. Augustine and Dresden. Their core competencies are artificial intelligence and machine learning. They developed leading technologies in the field of speech recognition, knowledge graphs, and question answering.
I hope this was, you could perceive it. And so from Fraunhofer IIS, one of the core components is the speech synthesis, but Fraunhofer IIS has, as you've heard, leading in the technology field of speech recognition. So also here I would have a short example, which is about the speech recognition, which is already productive in use at the Saxony State Parliament. and the speech recognition is subtitling live and in real time. What one can see is we don't offer a huge variety of languages yet. However, we are able to retrain domain-specific vocabulary and also politician names, and also retrain it for local dialects. And one of the key features is that data security, which means the recordings are stored in the safe data centers at the parliament, and they never leave the parliament. Just to give you a brief feel of it.
Frau Präsidentin, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, ganz so banal und ganz so rein technisch, Kollege Hartmann oder auch Kollege Ballas, wie Sie das hier dem Publikum vermitteln wollen, ist es nun doch nicht.
Good. So these subtitling happens in real time, and I think one could see that even the dialect, which is maybe a bit more strong of the Saxony parliamenticians, was correctly transcribed. So, but let's get back to the speaker project. What is the speaker project about? So basically, it is about complementing the Fraunhofer technologies and offering to our partners and enabling them to basically produce realistic use cases. And thus we started off the project with collecting requirements of the consortium partners and the German economy, and we identified several of them. One of it would be the uncompromised data protection. This is up to the highest, let's say, level that you can host all of the components yourself. As you could see with the examples beforehand, all of our components are customizable in order to, for example, also recognize domain-specific vocabulary. And it is modular in the architecture, which means single components or modules can be used and interfaced also by other platforms, for example, ELG, and they are interoperable with existing processes. What we mean by this is, for example, you could access existing databases, SAP systems, APIs, name it. The technology stack at the moment is focusing on German and English because it's funded by the German ministry. But to give a little bit, to spoiler a bit, there are more languages in the pipeline. And as mentioned before, one of the key features or the key aspects of Speaker is that we're piloting our technology stack already in applications together with our consortium partners. To give a bit the span of different applications that we address, to give you some insights, I prepared some different industry sector and overview over it. So, for example, our technology stack can be used for preparing protocols here, depictively in the domain of, in the medical domain, but also command and control, for example, in the industrial environment, or also domain-specific speech assistance. Also here, for example, information retrieval in a repair scenario or maintenance scenario. But also we have partners addressing speech assistance for infotainment, for example, or also speech assistant for consumers, here depicted as a market. Our partner is rather focusing on the hospitality sector. Always talking about technology stack, Speaker technology stack, or also Fraunhofer technology stack. Here you can see the main components. For example, the speech is acquired by different microphones, so we need an acoustic front end. I already talked about up here, which is a microphone signal enhancement stack technology component, which can be used. And then we have an ASR, as you could see, for the Saxony Parliament, which is adaptable to the domain. And then we have different components, for example, a dialogue manager, question answering components, knowledge graphs, machine reading comprehension. And in the end, of course, you expect the speech assistant to give an answer, which is synthesized by the TTS. As you could have also heard, there was the technology that was introducing the Fraunhofer IIS. And the end of it all, one expects an answer, so we basically need to play back the audio. What we identified already in the beginning of the project was that, especially for speech assistant, the user experience is key, which means we have a team who is taking care of the user experience, not only for the developed speech assistant in the end, but also for how easy it is for our partners to use our components, our GUIs, our web front ends, or also to adopt the components. And of course, as many, if not all of the components are based on AI technology. Data is key again. So we have a group specializing in data acquisition and management. I was always talking about our partners and that it's a lot, and we're basically working with them on pilot use cases. And here you can see Fraunhofer IIS as well as Fraunhofer IIS are leading the consortium, and there are 17 different funded partners. One of them, for example, is hosting the platform, which is Cloud and Heat. Others are providing pilot use cases, and still others are, for example, technology component providers such as the DFKI or D-Ring and Retresco. Exactly. So one new thing which you might have not heard so far from Fraunhofer is that talking always about a strategic partnership between Fraunhofer IIS as well as Fraunhofer AIS, we actually released a brand name called Lingua, and this is basically will be the brand name for all of our speech assistant technologies. And feel free to visit the homepage. At the moment, the homepage is brand new. It got released on Thursday. So at the moment, it's just in German, but of course, we will provide also an English translation to the homepage. Thank you very much for your attention. And yes, I'm looking forward to the discussion later in the podium.
Great. Thanks so much, Johannes, for this brief overview of the project. And as you mentioned, questions can be then asked in the discussion period. Thanks again. Moving on. Sonja is already starting to share her screen. Excellent. The next project is another national project here in Germany. It's called NFBI for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence. That's quite a handful. It's presented by Sonja Schimmler of Fraunhofer Fokus. Yeah, it's another Fraunhofer Institute here located in Berlin. Sonja Schimmler is a research group leader here at the Weizenbaum Institute in Berlin, which is focused on internet-related research. In a general sense, she's also a project leader at Fraunhofer Fokus, and she also has a head at Technical University, where she also leads the group. And Sonja happens to be the coordinator of this project NFBI for data science, and she will give us a brief overview of the project and probably also for those from abroad what NFBI is. Sonja, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Georg, for the kind introduction. Today, I'm going to present you a little bit NFBI for Data Science, which is a consortium, and NFBI for Data Science actually stands for a National Research Data Infrastructure for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence. Before I start, I want to tell you a little bit about what NFDI actually is. NFDI stands for National Research Data Infrastructure. It's a very large German initiative driven by the state. And what is the intention? The NFDI has the objective to systematically index, edit, interconnect, and make available the valuable stock of data from science and research. There are actually consortia built up at the moment. In the end, there are going to be 30 of them. There were some starting last year and some were starting this year. One of the consortia that was starting this year was NFDI for Data Science. And all those consortia target certain disciplines, certain research disciplines. And our consortium, NFDI for Data Science, aims to develop a research data infrastructure for data science and artificial intelligence. And the two main pillars of this project are fair digital objects and knowledge graphs. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about those two concepts in a minute. Just before I start to dive into it a little bit further, I want to give you a little bit of a motivation. What our observation was is that there's currently a paradigm shift in computer science towards data and deep learning driven methods. So to say that data science is the fourth paradigm. And we have two problems at the moment that we have to target. First, there's a reproducibility crisis. For instance, I brought you an example, a study on neural recommender publications at top-tier venues finds that only 7 of 18 are reproducible and only 1 of 18 are beating state of the art. And there's also another problem. There's bias and discrimination from learned data-induced biases. And here I brought you also 2 examples. For instance, the gender classification performance of neural approaches performs significantly worse for darker-skinned women, and the health risks of Black people consistently is underestimated by predictive algorithms. So coming from those observations, our vision is that we want to advance the paradigm shift in computer science, data science, and artificial intelligence, where big data, so to say, research data, enables potent deep learning models leading to new computational solutions. And we want to achieve transparency and reproducibility in science, and we want to enforce fairness in science. And what we actually want to do is we want to provide a fully integrated approach for advanced solutions in science. We want a research data infrastructure that relies on the combination of data, models, and code and their dependencies. And we want data science pairing up with artificial intelligence as a cross-disciplinary competence, which requires to profit equally from computer science and domain expertise. To give you an overview of the consortium NFBI for data science. So what I wanted to tell you already, that the consortium is at the edge of computer science on the one side, on mathematics and statistics on the other side, and also the domain knowledge. So for us, it's very evident that we have all of this on board. To look at the consortium, I'm not the only one in the consortium. We have combined several universities on board. We have several outer non-university research institutes, and we have also 3 large information centers. And to show you the people behind this project, so here's an overview of all the people that are involved, all experts in the field that can contribute to this project. So diving a little bit into the work program of the consortium, we have a classic work program for such a project. And what you can see from the picture is that the very central aspect of this project is the research knowledge graphs, which you can see at the bottom in task area 2, which is really the center. And the idea is to combine code, models, data, publications, and other researches, and to provide some benefit with it. So the 2 main pillars are, on the one hand side, the research knowledge graphs, which is an open knowledge base of data science and artificial intelligence, resource metadata, and their relations, so a combination of the different artifacts. It's a state-of-the-art data representation to implement FAIR principles, and it's an open and transparent resource for searching research metadata and as public resource infrastructure through open APIs. And the other pillar, besides this connection of the different artifacts, are the so-called FAIR digital objects concept, which is meant to pack together the resources with some additional information. So you have the digital object, you have metadata, you have a service interface, and you have an identifier. So what is a FAIR digital object? It's a stable, actionable unit enabling reliable interpretation and processing of the contained metadata and its resources. And it enables the representation of a wide range of resources based on the FAIR principles. To give you an example, here we have in the center, we have the research knowledge graph, and what it combines, for instance, is resources from public repositories, some benchmarking information, resources from data repositories, source code, and notebooks and analytics. So it's a combination of all those artifacts that are present in research. And what we are doing is we don't intend to build a system from scratch. So what we rather want to do is we want to build of long established systems like DBLP, like Wikidata, or like the Open Research Knowledge Graph. So this is actually the idea, to use those systems, to combine those systems, and to provide some benefits. And what we're doing, we're not only building the infrastructure, but we also have some use cases, and we have 4 use cases we plan to do in the next 5 years. One of them, which might be the most important for you as the audience, is the part of language technology. Another use case is in the area of life science, informatics research. One is in the area of information sciences, and the last one is in computational social sciences. And it's not only the consortium itself, but we also want to have some further projects that are coming in. We have a so-called speedboat projects, which are funded, where we intend to start with other communities, with other application areas. And we will also have lots of webinars, hackathons, symposia, challenges, and competitions, though there's a lot of potential to get involved into these initiatives. So thanks again for listening to me, for my short introduction for NFDI for data science. Georg, you are still muted.
It happens at least once. Thanks. Thanks so much, Sonja, for the introduction and the overview of the of this project, which will run eventually, hopefully, for a whole 10 years, like all the other NFBI projects. So this is a bigger thing, bigger than, I don't know, the typical 2-year innovation action or so. Our team here at DFKI is also involved, and we look forward to this large project. Thanks again. Moving on to the European level again, to the EBU, European Broadcasting Union. The project is called A European Perspective, and it's presented by Justyna and Sébastien Noir from EBU in Switzerland. Justyna is a senior manager of news strategy and development, and used to be the EBU News Committee's secretary and news editor. Sébastien is the head of software technology and innovation, and I look forward to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Georg. Thank you, everybody, for having us. So, European Broadcasting Union and the project, and for listening about the European Perspective project. So the European Broadcasting Union is the association of public radio and broadcasters and TV stations. And in fact, this year, we are celebrating a 60th anniversary of the Eurovision News Exchange. So 60 years ago, these broadcasters started exchanging broadcast content for their news bulletins, live coverage and edited coverage. And exactly 2 years ago, at the start, this was our first hybrid meeting at the start of the pandemic. We have gathered a group of editors and digital editors, and we said, okay, so how can we try to exchange the content in the digital environment? And we asked ourselves, how can we bring the online stories that are published by our members to pan-European audiences? And this is how a European perspective concept was born 2 years ago. And the idea was to share online stories, multimedia, so both text, video or audio. And we are sharing them via our members' outputs for the moment. Before we were able to go into the public-facing part, which is a B2C, and is co-funded by the European Union, a European perspective. We have first built something which we call monitoring tool, or the digital news hub, where we gather in real time articles from our members, and this is used as an internal tool among the newsrooms to see what's trending, what's happening online at members. So what I suggest is that we watch a very short video which will give you insights of how it works. So if you could, Sébastien, play it, that would be great.
Public service media organisations together make up Europe's largest newsroom, investing €5.5 billion a year and employing over 40,000 journalists to deliver independent, trusted news. What if we connected them all together? Introducing the Eurovision News Monitoring Tool, an exciting new service providing journalists with real-time insight into the diverse range of online content from EBU members' newsrooms. Over 1,500 news items every day, all translated into English using the EBU's groundbreaking Eurovox software. Content can be filtered by category, source, date, or by keywords. Peach, the EBU's personalization and recommendation system, will then find related content. The Eurovision News Monitoring Tool is a powerful asset to journalists researching stories. Translated news pieces provide deeper knowledge and inspire new approaches. And now, we're joining up to go one step further, creating a European perspective. This will enable broadcasters to provide their audiences with trusted news from across the continent. Embedded in members' own websites, the widget will provide European citizens with fresh insights on issues of common concern, be it coronavirus, climate change, or culture. Together, we can get Europe talking.
Thank you, Sébastien. And we can move to the next slide. So, as you can see, there was a little bit of time before we made this video, so the European perspective is out. It is on the websites of 10 of our members. So if you go to France Info or RT in Ireland, on the front page you will see this window where you see stories from across Europe. Two editorial challenges, but also technological, is of course one, copyright clearance, especially for the video, and the second one is translation. And Sébastien in a moment will explain to you how we are helping ourselves with machine translation, how we are assisting the journalists, and how we are helping to bring those stories. And the last slide that I wanted to show you from my side before I hand over to Sébastien is this slide. So a European perspective is fairly young. It was launched on the 1st of July, so we are just over 4 months old. Here you see data for the period, audience data for July, end of September, and you can see that even though we started not with extreme amounts of content, but our books have been seen on members' websites by pan-European audiences in Europe over 14 million times, and over 500,000 times the articles were read by pan-European audiences. So the idea is to bring the journalism and share the journalism across Europe. And now hand over to Sébastien, who is the head of software development and the mastermind behind this project, to tell you a little bit more about the Eurovox and the Peach, the systems powering the project.
Thank you, Justyna. So instead of going to slides, since the time is running, I will just go maybe to the presentation of the tool itself to give you an idea of what this is. So it looks like that. It's a web application, and we can see here the huge selection of content that we are receiving from all around Europe. And if I would refresh the page, probably we will see something that was just pulled very freshly in the system. And in case we have it here, so just 5 minutes ago, this content was published by RTS, that's the French-speaking Swiss broadcaster. It was published in French at that time, and we can read here the original text in French, but we already translated that to English. And in fact, we do translate everything that comes in the system automatically to English. And in this way, every journalist in the different newsrooms around Europe can access the whole content of Europe in English. But maybe you say, well, English is good, but I would prefer to have that in my own language. So you can very simply ask to translate the French original to any other language that we support here. So for the moment, you have the list here. So for example, if I would pick Italian, in just a matter of seconds, I should be able to read this article also in my language. Yeah, and in fact, now that's the case. I have it now in Italian. So that's the first thing we do. We provide this kind of universal view of whatever happens in Europe in real time, and we accumulate all those different articles in the database that we have. And you can see here that we have passed the mark of 500,000 articles coming from all around Europe, and this is not including any translations. You can see here the list of sources that we have, and we have different filters here to be able to find the content that is relevant, be it by date, by specific topics that we extract also automatically, specific categories. For example, if you'd like to see what we have now in technology or in sports or anything, you can basically pick your things and find content that would be of interest for you. You can see that even now I have new content that just came in the system as we speak, and I can also see it. So if we just go a little bit deeper in the tool, here is a good example where you can see that we support very rich stories. So it's not just about doing the text translation, but we try to retain the articles as they would be fit for presentation to the end users. So we have titles, we have images that can be embedded. You can see that we have also the workflows in place to deal with the rights clearance. We have obviously the attribution and descriptions beside the images that are there. We have here media that was processed and that was translated. More about that in just a moment. We have more images and so on. So the content can be coming from all different sources, but it can also come in various different shapes. And we retain this full multimedia aspect of the content within the tool, despite the fact that we are doing the translations. Here is maybe a simple example of a content that was originally in German, that was translated here to English, and we have also translated the associated media that was also in German, as you can guess, and now we can listen to it in English. So let's just play a bit of that.
The Bavarian climate protection law was passed in the state parliament 6 months ago and is already out of date after the judgment of the Federal Constitutional Court. Marcin Feder therefore promises Irish climate targets 2040, climate 2050-2030, savings of up to 65%. A new law is still pending. It must be a lot to change.
So it's not perfect, but I guess you can have a good idea of what the media is about, and we will see in just a moment how we can improve the translation still. This was done fully automatically without any humans in the loop. Another one here, we have content about Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron. And here we are using other features that we have and other software that we have developed within DBU. So we have a recommendation algorithm, and we can see that it tries to pull, first of all, the similar stories that we have from the same publishers. So that's the publishers related news. But here we have also different algorithms that provide us with this related content overview that comes from all around Europe. So if you're reading a specific story about a specific topic, you don't have to search for others. They will just come at you here, and you can see that, just by looking at the images, you can see that it's also about Emmanuel Macron and Angela Merkel. So you have this pan-European perspective about the content at your fingertips in just a few seconds as it happens. More things, obviously we have a search engine. So here I just looked for Tesla, and we can see everything about Tesla. You could go about Bitcoin or anything, and you'll see all the news that come from all those different places. And you can also shape your mind, or if you're doing a bit of research about anything that would be specific. Just because we have over 500,000 articles, it pretty means we are able to have content about basically anything that you could think of. If we continue the exploration, we have here a nice content with nice images, but that's not so much interesting. What is important and interesting is that we retain also every publication step that were published by the original source. So if you look at the image here, and I would just go maybe to another version, you can see that we have something that is totally different. And it's just because the article evolves over time, and we retain every possible version of the article over time as well. About the media translation, we are using Eurovox. This is also a tool that we created within the EBU, and you can see here a bit how it works. So let me just play a bit here.
He'll be looking to repair his reputation after the murder of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The French president said the world was still looking for answers.
I
hope the investigations being carried out both in Turkey.
So I guess you can fully understand how it works. We have the audio, then the audio gets transcribed, and here we have the transcription here on the left side. Then we do a translation. In that case, it's done to French, and we can see also the changes. And from there, we can either revoice or create subtitles for the content. But that is the automatic process. But in some cases, and you can see that here, it's not working well because you need to change something. Here we have the President Macron talking already in French, and that causes for some bad translation, or transcription rather. So then I can also fix that, and I say here, I can update that if I want. I then can commit my changes. I could also split sentences if I want to. And then the translation here, as you can see, is recomputing, and now I have a better translation. And I could also very easily add more translation to more languages if I want to. So it means that editors can spend time to refine the transcription or the translation, and that they can create new medias right from their desktops without specific knowledge. And this enables us to have both a process that is quick and easy for those translation, but as well, if people have the time and the luxury to spend a bit more time, they can refine the content, and then we can have content of very good quality. Just last thing, so this is France Info website, that's their homepage, you can go there and see it. So we have created this recommendation box that was just talked about by Justyna just moments ago. And we can see here that we have something that looks quite similar to the tool that we have shown, and that France Info is able to basically pull those different articles from those different sources. RTV would be in Spain, RTBF from Belgium, RTP in Portugal, RAI from Italy. So they have this European perspective of whatever they want to select. And through the tools that we have created, they can easily integrate that on their own websites. And as a user, I can quickly click one of those items, and then I can read that without even leaving the website. I can read the full article. I could even play media if there is anything here. Let me see if they have added any kind of medias. Yes, here. So for example, I could play that and see this volcano. So all of that is available to all those participating members, which means they are able to publish each other's contents in new ways and somehow strengthen their position as trusted content providers to their audience. I think that would be it on my side. Thank you. Over to you, Georg.
Great. Thanks so much, Justyna and Sébastien, for this overview. Looks like an exciting tool, also very useful, impressive number of views. So it's too early to congratulate you on a successfully concluded project, but congrats already on this great start. Amazing.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions, but we need to move them to the discussion period. Great. Next up, another EU project, WeVerify, which is presented by Kalina Bontcheva, University of Sheffield. Kalina is a professor of text analytics at University of Sheffield and the head of the NLP group at the University of Sheffield. And it's not a surprise that she's mainly focusing on research on disinformation, online abuse, and the connection to NLP. Kalina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Georg. I will try and share my screen now, and thank you everybody for the opportunity to present the project to you. If at any point there starts being a problem with my broadband, please do let me know, and I'll switch off the video. Apparently there was a fire at the exchange and it's a bit slower than usual, and they told me just as I was on the call already. So yes, I will have the pleasure today to tell you a bit more about the WeVerify project, which stands for Wider and Enhanced Verification for You. This is a project that started about just under 3 years ago. It's due to complete at the end of this month. And it has developed a wide range of tools for disinformation detection and analysis, some of which you may actually come in touch with if you are involved in some of the EDMO hubs. So EDMO is the European Digital Media Observatory. And then another one that you may have come in contact with is the INVIT WeVerify plugin, which is developed by AFB and also has components from us ourselves here on the text analysis side, CERT on the image and video analysis, and then onto text as well, where they have a so-called database of known fakes. So you can see the consortium at the very top, and I will use the time to tell you a bit more about the project. So we have been working on developing tools to address a number of key challenges that in tackling disinformation that have been occurring with increasing importance and frequency recently. So we have, first of all, the plugin, as well as the Truly Media platform from ATC and Deutsche Welle. Those two started primarily trying to address misleading and inauthentic information around elections, with focus on European elections. And then most recently, while the project was going, we had to change some focus and actually widen the scope to include public health mis and disinformation, specifically on COVID-19, unsurprisingly. As part of some of the research around elections and the tools, we've also looked at propaganda disinformation by state actors. Key to all of the approaches is the ability to perform cross-platform analysis. So we want to be looking at not just, say, for example, Twitter or Facebook on its own, but to be able to collect and track information, misinformation, and actors spreading it across these different platforms as well. And then one other key aspect which we addressed is that, as you all know, if you have engaged in research in this area, the platforms, of course, once reported, remove the disinformation in most cases. So you do want to archive the content for future research, and also to link to that as part of your, for example, debunk. So we've added now tool support to do that very straightforwardly for journalists from within some of the technology. So before I go and talk a bit more and show you some examples of the various tools, I also wanted to say that there has been a very close collaboration between WeVerify and EOG. So we integrated already quite a number of the disinformation analysis tools, not the user-facing ones, but those that can be used as to process disinformation on demand in the EOG platform. So here you can see the first such example, the COVID-19 vaccine text categorizer. So basically, it currently is developed only for English, but we are working on improving and adding new languages as well. So you can see here, this is the actual page on the EOG platform for this service. You can see who has provided the service. You can find additional information. You can see versions and so on. And you can also try this out and see what kind of outputs you will get. So I'll give you some examples of that later. But this is an example about how, like technology that has been developed in one project has very quickly found its way into the EOG, and we've made it available for replicability and use by others through the platform. So another such example is the COVID-19 claim categorizer. So in this case, again, we take a statement about COVID-19 and we automatically categorize it into one of 10 categories. These 10 categories were proposed by the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism in a research paper. And we basically took those. We did a very nice collaborative annotation exercise that included quite a few members, actually volunteers from the NLP community as well. And we tagged the new data set and made that available to the community, but also we've now made available this categorizer through the EOG platform for others to use. So again, you can find information on how to run it here if you click on that button, or you can just try it out. We provide also some code examples, and so that makes hopefully things very much easier for you. So let's just look a bit more into depth here. So I will only focus on a small number of the text-based disinformation processing tools in WeVerify. There's a much wider range. So if you're interested, I can send you links and to YouTube videos with demos and so on. But for now, because also I presented some of this already, I think 2 years ago, I wanted to, when it was starting really, now I've just given you some of the new tools. So here this is the misinformation categorizer in a bit more detail. So here is actually the web user interface we used with the NLP research community to create a data set. And so here we have the claim, and we have a little explanation. So these are all taken from fact checks published by IFCN approved fact checkers. In this case, it's AFP. And here the NLP professionals, researchers were asked to select one of the following categories. And they did have a, they could click on these little numbers and they can get the description of the category, the definition. So they could decide which way. We allow them to provide confidence and so on, and give remarks if they wish to. So yeah, the data set and the algorithm is also already published. If you want to find out more or use it to in your own research. So what we did then on top of this is, so once you have the automated categorizer, for example, we worked with First Draft in the UK and US to create a nice looking set of interfaces that basically allowed us to process a lot of the information, all the claims from the IFCN fact checks. I think at the time there were 6,000. At the moment, there's 12,000, and they're all related to COVID-19. It's a database of fact checks, and we applied the categorizer on that, and then we put a web interface on top. And basically what it allows you to do then is you can filter, you can zoom in specifically on what conspiracy theories have been circulating, what was the engagement with them, who is the fact checker that published them, and then you can see what they were about. Similarly, we could plot these on a world map, so you can see where are the most frequently occurring and debunked conspiracies, which countries they appeared in, and so on. Some of our recent research now is making this multilingual. So we are working on basically being able to track and identify when the same conspiracy theory or the same claim, it doesn't need to be a conspiracy theory, but the same false claim appears in different languages and in different countries, and on different platforms. So this is something that we're currently working on, and there's an early preprint which we hope to publish very, very soon in a peer review forum. So if you'd like to find out more about this, about the data deficits work and the visualizations, please feel free to follow these links. We'll share the slides afterwards. Another example, which is really interesting, is trying to, because what was happening was that initially we started off by doing what most people that research this information are doing, which is, okay, here are some claims. Let's try and categorize automatically whether we think they're true or false. The algorithm thinks they're true or false, but the fact checkers that worked with us actually said, no, this is our job. We don't want to be told by an algorithm whether something's true or false. But instead, actually, what would be really much more helpful is if we can start analyzing the conversations around this information, understanding, for example, which pieces of misinformation or disinformation people are believing in, which are they debunking themselves. But also a flip point to this is, can we use the wisdom of the crowd to debunk disinformation much quicker? So can the crowd provide us evidence as to the fact that something is false? And can we use that to help with the fact checking? So this is kind of a new tool that we developed and are currently trialing with the journalists. Is based on the so-called rumor stance detection, which is research that we've been carrying out for the past 5 years, starting also from the FIMI project. This is an English example, but we do support now other languages as well. So that was something that was done new in WeVerify, the support for the new languages. So just to explain also a little bit as to why this is important to the fact checkers, because the fact checkers, they publish debunks. They don't just say this is true or false. Instead, they provide evidence, they provide wider context, and these debunk articles are meant to educate the reader and actually help persuade them that they're this is really wrong. So as part of the debunk writing, they're they're presenting evidence of external reliable sources that the reader can refer to and make their own conclusions. So this is kind of the key point. And like each of the debunks always has this, it will refer sometimes or just give a screenshot of the false information, but the most important thing is the evidence and the narrative that the journalists publish in the debunks. So the idea is to help them with building that narrative and finding that evidence. So here we take an interesting case, which is, this is not typically somebody that we associate with misinformation. This is, of course, the French president. And at some point when there was the Amazon rainforest fires, I think that was sometime last year, he published this tweet. And it had that picture, and it made this set of assertions. So with this is what the journalist would do. I mean, you can imagine it's a long actual window. I can't fit it in now, so we'll just go through that in a series of screenshots. So here you have the tweets, and we say analyze it. And the first thing, of course, it does is it just renders it as Twitter would, gives you some basic information. But then what happens underneath is that it applies the categorization of the comments. So this tweet itself had about 20,000 comments. And of course, the journalists don't want to read any of this. And unsurprisingly, the vast majority of them are just commenting on what Macron has published. But what the journalists are really interested in are these ones that are like debunking or disapproving or voicing lack of consent with what's being said in the tweet. And we can see that in this case, there's quite a lot of these. And here you can see also the temporal distribution of these replies. You can zoom in on specific days and so on. And once as a journalist, for example, you decide, okay, I want to just focus on those who disagreed. And so we choose that. You can further narrow down by hashtags, user mentions. You can say, okay, I want it to only contain URLs. So in any case, here we're looking at the ones that are disagreeing, and then you can start seeing, like basically in a box going all the way down in the window, all the ones that are disagreeing. Then you can see also the hashtags that are appearing in those that are disagreeing with what Macron is saying. You can see that some of them are saying that it's fake news, it's lying, and so on and so forth. And some of them, of course, are about the Amazon. So what happens when you look into that a bit further? We also show the URLs that have been shared within the disagreeing tweets, and we see very quickly that, and this is what the journalists were after, we very quickly see that this is a quite commonly shared URL. And this actually points to a stock photo. So Macron was not using a photo that was done last year of the fire that was happening at the time. He was using a stock photo that had been taken and published, like, I don't know, over 10 years ago. And this is kind of the source of some of the problems and disagreement, and the reason why he was called a liar. There was some also pointers to NASA and so on, which were denying some or challenging some of the other textual assertions he was making. You can also see here the users, but that's not so interesting. So something else that we've been working on in the pipeline.
Wrap up, Kalina.
Yes, something else that we've been working on in the pipeline is on OCR in images, and you can see here basically the journalists provide the image, and you get the transcriptions, but you also have the opportunity to do translation and so on. So that's something else that they're finding very interesting and relevant. So just one last thing to note, the OCR functions are currently not in EOG, but they are planned to be integrated for release 3. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Kalina, for this overview. And last but not least, we are now moving to Claire, which is not a project, as you know, it's a network, it's an initiative of European AI researchers. And with us today is Holger of University of Leiden. Holger is a professor of machine learning at Leiden University and a co-founder and chair of the board of Claire. And he's maybe the right person to explain the current state of play of this very important initiative. Holger,
thanks a lot, Georg. Pleasure to be here. I think we're running a little behind schedule, so let me try my best to be efficient. I want to briefly share some thoughts with you about the future of AI made in Europe, something I think we all care about because it will affect us all, and specifically the role of language technology in this context. So as Georg said, I'm speaking on behalf of CLAIRE, the Confederation of Laboratories for AI Research in Europe, the largest organization worldwide of its kind, that pushes for excellence across all of AI throughout all of Europe with a human-centered focus. So when we think about the future of AI made in Europe, a few scenarios can be mapped out. And the first of these, certainly not the one that we are most enthusiastic about, could be called the distant third, where European AI actually becomes a distant third to American and Chinese AI, where we start seeing a large gap in tech and research capability, and also where we lose quite a bit of our technological sovereignty, where a strong dependency on technology designed and run elsewhere emerges. And of course, in that scenario, also top talent will be mostly displaced or working remotely, as many have over these past months for global tech leaders anchored in the United States. Whereas European subsidiaries would mostly focus on compliance with EU rules and regulations, which certainly is interesting work, but perhaps not really what we have in terms of our level of ambition here. A slightly less unpleasant scenario could be called niches and specialties. And in this scenario, indeed, it's very much like the distant third, except that now we have islands of European excellence. And these islands tend to be quite small and highly specialized. And as a result, the economic benefits resulting from them would be very uneven and broadly outweighed by a dependence on technology made elsewhere. And that's also, of course, not really what we want, although it's a touch better. So here's the scenario that I think we are all hoping for and working towards. We could call that global leadership. And what that means, of course, we want to stay realistic, is that Europe becomes a global leader in AI and the global leader in human-centered, trustworthy AI. And that's, of course, what the European Commission also wants to achieve. In this scenario, AI research and technological capabilities in Europe are comparable to those in the US and China, maybe not in all areas, but pretty much broadly across the board. And there is clear leadership in human-centered, trustworthy AI. Also, there would be clear leadership in a global coalition that is strongly committed to AI for good and AI for all. And finally, Europe, under this scenario, would be equally attractive to top talent, as is the US and China. So the key question, of course, is how do we realize the scenario A? How do we get to global leadership in human-centered AI? And I would really cherish to be able to tell you all we need to do is proceed according to the plans that we have made, that actually the European Commission has made. But unfortunately, I don't think that will get us there. What is really needed is a bold vision and a concerted implementation, neither of which I believe we currently unfortunately see. And this is where CLAIRE comes into play. CLAIRE with its dual focus on AI for good, and that means AI that is aimed at meeting the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and AI for all, and that means AI for the benefit of everyone, citizens, industry, non-profits, society at large. So many of you are quite familiar with CLAIRE. We've had quite a bit of success over the last 3 years, the 3 years that we've existed. But for the rest of you, CLAIRE is a non-profit organization, a so-called AISBL, with the goal of positioning Europe as a global lead in human-centered AI. It has assembled a very large research network, as I said earlier, the largest of its kind, of 400 and more AI research groups and institutes, including very large ones such as DFKI and some INRIA institutes, or IMEC in Belgium, all the way to very small but impactful research groups consisting of just a few professors and a bunch of grad students. Overall, the research network represents over 23,000 scientists and support staff. CLAIRE has also started to assemble an innovation network made out of companies that leverage these capabilities for the benefit of Europe's businesses. CLAIRE is playing currently a key role in setting up the European Commission's private-public partnership on AI, data, and robotics called ADRA. It's one of 5 founding members there. And it has the coordination mandate and a major stake in the EU-wide ICT 48 networks of centers of excellence, which are a core component of the Commission's strategy on AI. CLAIRE collaborates strongly with the European Space Agency and has been endorsed by the highest level of ESA. And the CLAIRE vision is officially supported by a growing number of EU member state governments, currently the 9 whose flags you see down there, which, as you may easily see, include some rather large ones such as Italy and Spain, and also the Benelux countries. Now, CLAIRE cares quite deeply about NLP, not just because we think, the NLP community is a very nice community full of very capable and nice to interact with people, but in fact, 193 of our current 430 research member groups, and that's just shy of 50%, have some expertise in NLP, according to a survey that we've run recently. Of course, we have a so-called informal advisory group on NLP, which consists of high caliber European NLP and language technology scientists that advise us on connections to the community and the needs of the community. We are involved in an 18-month EU project called European Language Equality, where we collect and document ideas, obstacles, needs, and factors that drive developments in this area. We also work with the European Commission and try to help them do what's right and what's needed in order to get us into this desirable scenario of global leadership. And in that role, we have recently published 14 recommendations on the European Commission's AI strategy, which you can find under this URL. I'll share the slides with you just after the presentation so you can go there. And for the rest of this presentation, I want to very briefly talk about a few of those because I think they're of interest to you. So our first recommendation is that any definition of AI used by the European Union should be accepted by a broad majority of the international AI community. I mean, that sounds like a lot of common sense, but unfortunately, the definitions that are currently used, they don't satisfy that criterion. And so what CLAIRE believes AI is, and this is now a definition that we've shared with the Commission on various occasions and that we believe does meet the bar that we just set. What is AI is basically this. AI approaches are distinguished from other kinds of computation in that they exhibit key aspects of behavior considered as intelligent in humans, and thus enable fundamentally new levels of automation and delegation. And then this is expanded, and I won't read the whole thing, you can do that later at your leisure, but I want to point out that there is already in CLAIRE's definition a focus on linguistic processes and also on cooperating intellectually with humans, which of course means cooperation through language. So what is human-centered AI? That's also important to know because different people have sort of different ideas about this. CLAIRE's idea on this is rather crisp and also globally quite widely shared. And that is that human-centered AI is AI that aims to augment rather than to replace human intelligence and thus compensate for human weaknesses, bias, and limitations. And actually much of what we've heard over the last half hour and a bit gave very clear examples for uses of NLP technology in that regard. And I want to just note that, of course, language is key to human interaction and therefore also key to human-centered AI. So, of course, I won't go through all the recommendations, but here's one that I think is relevant, recommendation number 7, which says to achieve global impact, the investment into the European AI research and innovation ecosystem needs to be much more substantial and has to be made in a way that leverages broader parts of the European AI research ecosystem and cannot be solely targeted to a set of weakly coordinated research networks, which is essentially what a major part of the current plans amount to. And here, I want to give you a little snippet from page 22 of Claire's document that we sent to the Commission that actually makes the point that NLP needs special attention, because there we say very clearly that dedicated large-scale funding for natural language processing in light of European language diversity, another area of crucial importance along with robotics, which is named just before, also for public administration and industry, appears to be missing from the coordinated plan on AI, which threatens to erode the existing European leadership in this area. So we very much stand up for the needs of NLP and the importance there. And that also comes through in our recommendation number 9, which is to implement key parts of the coordinated plan through longer-term mission-oriented investments, including 7- and 10-year funding for research networks, as has been made available in an increasing number of member states as part of their AI strategies. And here I want to share with you just a very fresh set of results from the survey that Claire has run in the context of the ELE project that I mentioned earlier, where we found clear evidence that in this case, close to 90% of the community, of the AI community that we surveyed, believes that the kind of funding that I just mentioned, large scale and long term, in European language technology would be effective or very effective in speeding up the development and deployment of language technology in Europe equally for all languages. So actually very strong support for this idea that the Commission and the European Union need to do more there. Finally, recommendation number 13, one that is particularly close to my heart and many other people associated with Claire, is to establish a central physical European lighthouse center for AI in order to bring together the AI ecosystem and to create global momentum that can help Europe reach the ambition stated in the coordinated plan, and therefore also emerge as a leader in human-centered AI. And the idea behind this Lighthouse Center is to create a global attractor for AI talent, a hub in a network of centers which themselves are situated in an even broader and broadly encompassing European AI research network, to create a focal point for exchange and interaction, a world-leading infrastructure and support, and a symbol for European excellence and ambition in AI. And I'm mentioning this here because one goal behind this, of quite a few, is to enable leadership in cutting-edge open large language models that would be free to use for non-profit and commercial uses. As you know, models such as BERT are currently pushed by very large corporations and entities that are based outside of Europe and mostly have profit-driven goals. And we think it's very important to be able to compete eye to eye to that in the public domain. And we think that having a Lighthouse Center and the compute data and support infrastructure that would bring could be actually a very effective way for doing that. So here's my take-home message, wrapping this up. So how do we realize the scenario A in which Europe becomes a global leader in human-centered AI, in AI for good, and AI for all, and the kind of AI that's actually really good for society, that's good for the planet as well? Well, what we need is essentially two things. Overall, we need a bold vision and concerted implementation, and Claire is very strongly committed to that and working on that together with quite a few of you. And from you, what we need is your help. If you haven't done so already, do consider joining Claire as a member or a supporter. You can find more under this URL. I want to close with saying I really truly believe, although I'm not particularly active in this field, but I'm watching it with great interest, that NLP and language technology play a key role, certainly in Europe, but probably to a similar extent around the world. So we do well if in Europe we leverage our capabilities and our potential in that area for the benefit of everyone. Thank you very much for your attention. And as I announced, I will just drop the link to the slides into the chat. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Holger, for this presentation, and also for highlighting the role of NLP and LT in the wider European AI area, which is crucial, absolutely crucial. We are indeed slightly behind schedule. We have a couple of minutes left. I personally have a list of maybe 20, 25 questions here. We can't go through all of them. So let's have a look maybe at the Q&A tool. There's a question by Jochen Hummel, who says, multilingual AI is the only chance for Europe. In order to catch up in AI, we have to go where the leaders in the field are not going. The principles of the EU demand that our AI must work with multilingual data regardless. It's a long question. I'm just reading it out. We should put our focus and resources behind turning the perceived disadvantage of culturally and linguistically fragmented market into a unique selling point. If the EU gets multilingual AI and cross-border interoperability right, we can maintain or even extend our global position as a leading economic bloc, and I fully agree. That was more of a statement, endorsement than an actual question. I would like, due to a lack of additional questions in the Q&A tool, our panelists to, I think Gerhard had one of the questions. Gerhard was a moderator in the previous session. Is he still connected via audio? I don't think so, right? I thought he was still connected, but he isn't. Okay. Yeah, now you should be able to ask a question. Maybe a short one. One sentence question.
So, sorry, was that to me because I was being reconnected while you were talking? Now I can speak.
Okay, you have, yeah, one sentence question, please.
Okay, so the one sentence question was just to Kalina, actually, because we're also dealing with concepts, very complex concepts such as narratives here. And even what constitutes a narrative, of course, has semantic linguistic implications. It's really hard to grasp. It's different cultures, different philosophies. If you come from publication sciences, political sciences, it's a very interdisciplinary endeavor, really. And my question to Kalina was only, how can you come up? How on earth can we come up with a consistent and operationalized concept of what exactly constitutes a narrative?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. If you take even the examples of fact checkers, like one fact checking organization will rate something as true or false. Another one will have like a 5-point scale of rating what's true, shades of truthfulness and falseness and so on. So yes, I mean, we decided basically to not try and add anything new to this situation. And try and define narratives and so on. Instead, we've adopted the definitions that Claire Wardle and First Draft have largely provided for what's disinformation, what's narratives, and so on. So as I said, I'll find the actual report and I'll send you the link to that. But yeah, I agree that it's a thorny issue. But as far as we're concerned, we are focused on the AI tools. We're not focused on trying to unpick these really challenging problems that other scientists from other fields are probably better equipped to do.
Mm-hmm. But it's a fair point, yeah, and I think it also runs across various presentations that we've seen today. The question of let's say, more sophisticated, deeper text understanding, which is still lacking. Yeah, many of us still do entity spotting here and there, and maybe some entity linking against some knowledge bases, and that's pretty much where it ends. Really, yeah, coherence relations, stuff like this. Yeah, semantic relations in texts and how different pieces of a text are interconnected with one another, how they support or maybe contrast one another with rhetorical relations. It's very much underexplored, at least now in terms of transformer-based architectures. It's very much underexplored, and I think this is the next goal that we should aim for, which would benefit the work that Marcin is doing in the Parliament. Also, the EBU project would benefit massively from something like an operational computational approach there is a thing called computational narratology, yeah, but it's not really applied. It exists, and it's a research area in our field, but it's very much underexplored and underapplied in actual systems. It would also help Kalina in her work really drilling down what this strand of disinformation and misinformation actually is. There was one comment in the chat earlier on. Alexander Drexel asked this, and I think he commented upon it and had the same impression that the European perspective tool that you developed, Sébastien and Justyna, that it pretty much looks like the Europe Media Monitor. Are you familiar with EMM, developed by the European Commission?
I'm not sure that I know the one that you're talking about. Is it with the agencies, or it's yet another tool?
EMM
with news agencies.
EMM is not it looks a bit similar to what you are doing. Yeah, it's a tool developed by the European Commission for the European Commission. Yeah, it's for in-house use, developed by a group in Italy at Lago Maggiore, at the JRC in Italy, and they are doing cross-lingual text analytics-based media monitoring based on multiple news sources, most of which they gather online by simple crawling. And they have also provided, that team has provided many valuable language resources and entity lists and gazetteers throughout the years. And I think that this would make sense to have a chat with them.
Okay.
They also apply machine translation, they apply search, they try to track topics throughout Europe.
So I think that for us, in fact, Georg, maybe we should describe that we have actually two products in what you've seen. So we have the, as you say, the monitor, that is true. And here, for example, when we apply the automated translation, the precision is not that important because it helps quickly to access material. In what you have seen on the websites of our members in the European perspective, that is public facing. And if it's public facing, it means that what happens in our workflow in the public facing part, where, for example, France Info decides to publish news from TVE in Spain or from RTP in Portugal, and of course they have to translate it into French. So in the public facing situation, we, for the moment, really install almost two-step process, which means there is a human verification. And the reason for it is that, of course, the publishers are responsible for the content. And if there would be a mistake, that could even be a liability because of the wrong translation, not to mention the quality of what they deliver, that would be tricky. And the problem is that today the automated translation is perfect, of course, for the monitoring, but this would not meet the requirements that the publishers have for publishing. And also the one more element, or one more big challenge in the public-facing project is the copyright issue, which is directly connected with translation, which means that, for example, if I'm a single user and I'm, for example, the user of Google, I kind of personally give my personal agreement for Google to translate anything. When our members, when France Info publishes something, they take responsibility for this and the originating member. And in fact, the translation itself is a copyright change. It's like if we are changing the text, the original text. So the complexity here, it's much bigger. The more precise the systems are, of course, hopefully in the future it will be easier, because it seems only natural. You know, the last several months with COVID, with climate change, showed that this is it. We are in Europe a Babel tower, and we need to share content, and the sharing of this content is very important. But in reality, for publishers, the language is one of the challenges. So as I say, we have a human verification usually in two steps. One, when there is a contributing party, they verify the correctness of the translation into English, so that the other parties have the right text to work with. And of course, there is a verification on the publishing side. So it's not yet fully automated for the reasons that I've explained.
Yeah, the many different challenges you mentioned, they are, yeah, from a legal point of view, they are all clear, but they are difficult to tackle in order to arrive at what the Commission recently announced in the Digital Europe Work Program. The Commission wants, and this has been known for quite some time, that they want to establish different data spaces, yeah, domain-specific data spaces. There is supposed to be a language data space and a mobility data space and maybe a media data space and some others. And I guess these practical solutions that you have found in your project, they could also be worthwhile knowing to be applied in something like a media data space, for example. So these are important best practices. It's also important, of course, to the NFBI project. Yeah. So when we talk about research data, and then we also need to talk about the connection to actual production-ready industrial data spaces, which will also be interesting.
And Georg, can I mention one more thing? I was listening to Holger, and I just want to say that, you know, for us, as I said, we are receiving some funding as well for multimedia actions, which we are very happy about. We have applied for another funding, but I think we have the same conclusion as you said, and what you've seen is a little part of the vision, and the vision is to create kind of a more European public sphere where we can share not only public service media, you know, journalistic input, but maybe other academic input, relevant input. And I think what you said, Holger, is key. I think that you need a bold and long-term vision. Short things will not help us, and we need really kind of concentrated effort. So we just couldn't agree more with you, with what you were, with what you brought in, and we could just, you know, change maybe a few elements and would sign up to all the recommendations that you put. So I think that is really, really key.
Holger?
Yeah, thank you, Justyna, for saying this. I'm very happy to hear this evidently. I mean, you know, just to not be misunderstood, I don't think what the Commission does is misguided in any way, right? I mean, all of their investments sort of make sense, particularly if you look at them in isolation. I think that's the way many of them have been conceived. The problem is that that kind of thinking, which might have worked in other contexts and in the past, will not work for AI. And it will not work because there are other global players who, you know, do this in a more unified way, particularly China, but also the US, especially with the new administration. And it's a fiercely competitive situation. And, you know, we can sit here and we can say we don't like that it's such a competitive situation, but that won't change it one bit, right? On the other hand, there is an enormous chance. And I like, Justyna, that you put, I think, a very positive spin on it, right? This is our chance, admittedly under pressure, to sort of, you know, take one bold step further and commit to a long-term vision. Say, you know, we want to compete against these large commercial interests headquartered elsewhere. And that doesn't mean that we don't respect them and that we won't use them and that we won't support them at all. They're useful too, right? But they need to be counterbalanced by something in the public sphere. And I think that's what Europe can do and should do. But the only way we can do it is that we have to adopt, and pretty quickly, this sort of bold, ambitious thinking. And the Commission has done that well on one level, namely in formulating the ambition. Of course, that's the easier bit, but it's non-trivial, right? And they should be complimented for this. But now, of course, following through is much more difficult. And I think they need to hear it from everyone that we want this, right? We don't want this fragmented landscape. We don't think it's going to work, right? What we need is the big picture. And it's great if many of you believe that too, and we can jointly, you know, send that message to Brussels and also to our national governments, because that's the way to get movement going. So it would be fantastic to really have broad support from the NLP community and far beyond for this, because that's what's needed to get this tanker onto a new course.
Absolutely.
Indeed. Right, we're already 10 minutes across our allocated time box. With that, let's close the session, and I would like to thank again all the speakers. Thanks very much. Big round of applause for all of you. This also concludes Meta Forum for today. Yeah, we always do morning sessions in the virtual mode, and we will reconvene tomorrow at 9 o'clock with a with the session on a project that Holger mentioned, European Language Equality. Claire is a member of this project consortium with 52 project partners, all working towards one common goal, digital language equality. We'll start with that tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Look forward to seeing many of you there. And thanks again for your interventions and presentations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.